Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned the liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in 2000. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill Inn, Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sao bui lu, cap doi moi koi de tan hong tuan trang mat xa hoa kio de 12 gay tren du Thuyen Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh Askin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Askin, headed to the ship Ciaschino to continue the fun. George and Josh Askin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Ciaschino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Ciaschino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in a ship spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence the second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The 3 men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve the drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino manager. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m. But her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said, "Good night," repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Hyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claimed to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Hyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirm that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. Two possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Bota, and who both passed. However, Josh Askin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring 3 individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Josh Askin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation. The George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians: Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11th, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m., when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m., when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to they noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So, when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first dance, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his co-worker Cameron Fredrickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to visit Cody's new house, which he had purchased with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking with no response, Cameron let himself in and searched the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Cher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, "Hello, Jordan. My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email and it said Cody was gone." Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. "She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police, and she did, but I was rushing her, saying, 'Go, move, what are you doing?'" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing, and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient, at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction, or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was strangely chipper during the entire drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they went. Despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark wondering why on earth Cody would be in that location. It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all. The autopsy revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stallcup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange, in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address CarmenTony67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident, and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying that she was more concerned about herself than mourning Cody's death. Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family, and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan was born in 1987 in Wangjing, China, a major city and former capital. She came from a relatively affluent family, and her parents provided her with the best possible education, fostering her talents and potential. Wang Nan excelled academically, particularly in the sciences. After completing her secondary education, she enrolled in a prestigious university, studying business and Finance fundamentals while mastering multiple foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she established herself as a valuable, responsible, and highly motivated employee. Her career progressed rapidly, and she was soon assigned to Thailand to lead and develop a new branch. Wang Nan was a high-achieving manager at a travel agency, but she left to pursue her own business venture. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which quickly grew into a popular chain under her leadership. As a successful entrepreneur, Wang effectively managed and expanded her business. However, her professional success came at the cost of her personal life. Her last romantic relationship was during her university days, and once she started working, she had no time for dating due to her demanding schedule. Wang, nearing her 30th birthday, wasn't worried about her solitary life, consumed by her business. To improve her Thai skills, she enrolled in courses at a training center. There, she met Yu, who caught her attention by staring before approaching her in Thai. They briefly conversed, and Yu asked why she was studying Thai. Wang replied it was essential for her business growth. Yu proposed that they exchange business cards so they could arrange to meet again. As a courtesy, Wang gave him her card, and he gave her his in return. According to his card, Yu was involved in the export-import trade in Bangkok, but this information didn't make a significant impression on Wang, who simply put the card in her purse and forgot about it. In contrast, Yu seemed truly interested and followed up by calling Wang the very next day. However, she was too preoccupied with work at that time and politely turned down his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, the situation recurred. Wang declined another date, citing her busy schedule and preparations for a business conference where she aimed to expand her professional network. However, Yu appeared at the event, bearing a lavish bouquet of flowers. He waited for Wang to become available, then approached her and asked her out again. Wang was won over by Yu's persistence, as no one had ever pursued her so fervently. She agreed to dinner, marking the beginning of an unexpected romance. Yu fell deeply in love with Wang, showering her with attention, surprises, and gifts. He sent flowers and sweet notes every morning and called her twice a day. Wang's feelings were mixed, irritated by his intensity but flattered by his efforts. She found herself in a romantic relationship again, swept up by his wooing. Wang Nan was thrilled to discover that Yu shared her passions and hobbies. To win her heart, Yu made an effort to learn how to cook her favorite meals and surprised her with tickets to thrilling events. Not only was Yu charming, but he was also very supportive, always willing to lend a hand whenever Wang Nan needed it, whether at work or at home. Wang Nan felt like she was on cloud 9, but one thing bothered her. After just a few months of dating, Yu was already talking about getting married and even suggesting names for their future kids. Wang Man was taken aback by Yu's eagerness, but he justified it by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and it was time to start a family. Wang Man was unsure how to respond, feeling uncertain about Yu's suitability as a life partner. After a heart-to-heart conversation, where Wang Nan expressed her doubts, Yu vowed to prove his love. That night, he sent her a heartfelt letter, reaffirming his commitment to being a devoted husband and father. In the morning, Wang found Yu waiting on her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. He proclaimed his serious intentions and readiness to marry her immediately. Wang Man joked that the courthouse wouldn't be open for another hour and a half. However, Yu suggested going there right away, and if it was open, they would register their marriage on the spot. Wang agreed, confident that the courthouse would be closed. But to her surprise, they found it open, and the officer was already at his desk, ready to register their marriage registration. It was revealed that Yu had made prior arrangements, requesting a special exception to formalize their marriage early in the morning. The wedding was unusual, with no guests, rings, wedding dress, or photos. Wang couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't real, especially since she hadn't introduced Yu to her mother, with whom she was very close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate. Wang and Yu had a troubled family life. Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately after it was registered. Initially, she had hoped that Yu would be a good husband and a reliable partner. However, her hopes were soon dashed as Yu revealed his true nature. He spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money, and contributing nothing to the household income. When Wang asked him why he didn't work, Yu claimed that his business was experiencing a seasonal downturn and that he could take a break. However, this downturn had been ongoing for an extended period, prompting Wang to investigate her husband's business. She discovered that his supposed export-import business was merely a facade, existing only on paper and business cards. At that moment, Wang realized the gravity of her mistake in not creating a prenuptial agreement. This meant her husband, Yu, had the freedom to spend her earnings as he pleased and could claim her property in the event of a divorce. They had a heart-to-heart conversation, during which Yu broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find employment. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for a job and was content to rely on his wife's financial support. Yu, a grown man, regularly behaved immaturely, devoting most of his time to playing computer games. On the rare occasions when he helped with household chores or assisted his wife at their restaurant, he would request money from her for personal expenses. Wang eventually reached her limit and informed Yu she wouldn't give him any more money until he secured employment. The next day, following this conversation, Yu vanished, taking their marriage certificate and Wang's identity card with him. It wasn't until the evening, when Wang received a call from her accountant inquiring about a large sum of money transferred from her account, that she realized the item were missing. She was shocked, as she hadn't authorized any transfers, but she immediately suspected Yu. The transferred amount exceeded $500,000, which Yu had moved into his personal account by providing the bank with their marriage certificate, Wang's documents, and a claim that the money was jointly managed. Wang immediately reported the theft to the police, and her husband, Yu, was tracked down a few hours later when he tried to withdraw some of the stolen funds. Yu broke down in tears and begged for his wife's forgiveness, revealing that he had accumulated a large debt due to his gambling addiction and was being threatened. It was also revealed that Yu had a previous run-in with the law, having served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in China. Wang was both shocked and ashamed, realizing she was not as familiar with her husband as she had thought. Despite this, she viewed gambling as an illness and felt driven to support her husband in overcoming his addiction and resuming a normal life. Wang not only agreed to pay off half of Yu's debt but also offered him a job as a manager at one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu seemed grateful and took his new role seriously, even devising a successful strategy for the restaurant's development. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived, and he soon began spending more time playing computer games and engaging in other leisure activities. During that time, Wang found out she was pregnant and told her husband, Yu. However, he reacted strangely and aggressively, saying he wasn't ready for a child and wanted her to have an abortion. Wang refused, and Yu threatened to divorce her and divide their property through the court. He didn't speak to her for several days but then apologized and changed his behavior. Yu explained that he had said hurtful things in the heat of the moment but was actually happy about the pregnancy. He started showing care and helping out around the house again. 2 months later, Wang was happy because her marriage had improved, and Yu was being attentive and responsible. He was preparing their home for the arrival of the baby and doing his job as a manager. One day, Yu suggested getting life and health insurance for Wang because of her pregnancy, to protect her and the baby in case of unexpected events. Wang agreed and wondered why she hadn't thought of it earlier. They got the insurance the next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu suggested taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Wang was initially hesitant about taking a trip, but her husband persuaded her by pointing out that they had never had a honeymoon and would soon be too busy with their baby to travel. He also emphasized that they needed a break to clear their minds after a tough period. Eventually, Wang agreed to the trip. Her husband took charge of planning the trip, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities to ensure a balance of excitement, education, and relaxation, given Wang's pregnancy. Wang was happy to let him handle everything and was pleased to see how enthusiastic he was about their vacation. On June 7th, they arrived at the park and spent the day exploring, taking in the beautiful views and sights. As it was a summer Friday evening, the park was crowded with visitors. As the evening wore on, Wang noticed that her husband was becoming increasingly agitated and nervous. When she asked if everything was okay, he replied that the large crowds of tourists were ruining their chances of a peaceful and private sunset viewing. Wang Nan eventually agreed that it would be romantic to watch the sunset, as the park would become less crowded as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yu climbed over the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, telling her about the breathtaking view. However, Wang refused to join him, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu became angry but returned to her after a few minutes. He suggested that they should come back to the park to watch the sunrise instead. Since they returned to their hotel well past midnight, they decided to sleep in on Saturday and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. On Sunday, June 9th, a couple, Yu and Wang, visited the national park to watch the sunrise. They woke up at 3 a.m. and arrived at the park while it was still dark, finding the area mostly deserted. From an observation deck, they admired the dawn. Afterwards, Yu went down to a cliff and encouraged Wang to join him to see the rock paintings. Wang was hesitant, but Yu assured her it was safe and promised to help her down and then climb back up. She trusted him and cautiously approached the cliff. The view was breathtaking. Yu hugged Wang and asked if she had any regrets in life. She replied confidently that she didn't. Yu then ran his hand through her hair, kissed her cheek, and leaned in to whisper, "Die." He loosened his grip and pushed Wang down the cliff. He checked to ensure no one was watching, looked down but couldn't see where she had fallen. There was only silence, indicating no one had seen or heard anything. Yu walked calmly towards the park exit, intending to report the incident only after Wang was surely dead. However, a few hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang's body on the rocks and quickly called for rescue. As Yu left the reserve, several emergency vehicles with flashing lights and sirens sped past him. Realizing what was happening, he returned to the scene where his wife had fallen. Upon his return, Yu put on a dramatic display of grief, crying and screaming for help. Convinced that Wang was already dead, he thought no one would uncover the truth. But, as it turned out, Wang's fall was cushioned by tree branches, bushes, and rocks, which slowed her descent and saved her life, as well as the life of her unborn child. Though she suffered serious injuries, Wang suddenly opened her eyes and attempted to speak. Her husband's initial horror was evident to everyone present, but he quickly regained composure, leaned in close to Wang, and whispered in Chinese that she should remain silent if she wanted to live. Wang suffered severe injuries, including head trauma, multiple fractures, internal organ damage, and significant blood loss. Her spine was also badly damaged, leading doctors to worry that she might never walk again. She spent several days in a coma, during which her husband, Yu, stayed by her side. However, whenever he was alone with her, he thought about how to end her life without arousing suspicion. When Wang regained consciousness, Yu was extremely nervous, fearing she would reveal the truth to the police. He refused to leave her alone, even for a moment. Whenever he had the opportunity, he threatened her, claiming he had nothing to lose. Initially, Wang corroborated Yu's account, attributing her fall to dizziness. However, when Yu briefly left her side, Wang asked a nurse to call the police and prevent Yu from re-entering the room. It was then that she revealed the shocking truth, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu burst into the room, claiming his wife was insane due to a head injury and that he would never hurt her or the baby. However, his words lacked conviction, and he was taken into custody at the hospital that same day. He faced multiple charges, including attempted murder and intimidation, for trying to silence his wife. Initially, Wang had hoped to save her pregnancy, as the baby had survived the fall. However, the doctors advised an abortion due to the strong painkillers, multiple surgeries under general anesthesia, and the need for antibiotics. They prioritized Wang's life, as the fetus would likely not survive the effects of the medication. This news was devastating for Wang, but she followed the doctor's advice. Yu consistently denied his guilt and maintained that the event was an accident. In prison, he remained calm and hired skilled lawyers, confident that he could avoid or minimize punishment. Investigators and the prosecutor were convinced that he committed the crime out of self-interest, seeking a substantial insurance payout and his wife's significant fortune of nearly $2.5 million. However, during one interrogation, Yu stunned everyone by revealing another motive for his heinous act. He harbored resentment towards his wife, Wang, for agreeing to only pay off half of his debt, which he accumulated due to his gambling addiction. Yu believed that if his wife truly loved him, she would have covered all of his debts, given her financial means. He concluded that Wang did not love him and felt justified in punishing her. In March 2021, Yu was convicted and received a life sentence. However, Song and his lawyers submitted multiple appeals. 6 months later, the Thai court reduced the sentence to 33 years in prison, showing unusual leniency. Wang and her loved ones were shocked, arguing that such a light sentence would set a bad precedent and potentially encourage others to commit similar horrific crimes. In Yu's case, his relatives claimed that he was a wealthy businessman and that Wang married him for selfish reasons. However, this claim cannot be proven as Yu has nothing but huge debts. As for Wang, despite the doctor's predictions, she was able to recover after undergoing a series of complicated surgeries and a long rehabilitation process. She learned to walk again and spent most of her earnings on her recovery. In 2023, Wang returned to work and was able to revive her once successful business. She also founded an organization dedicated to helping women who are victims of domestic violence and runs her own blog, where she shares her experiences and warns women against making the same mistakes she did. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Chambers. Jessica Lane Chambers was a 19-year-old woman from Cortland who had a complex and challenging upbringing. She lived with her mother near her grandmother's house, while her father and stepmother resided down the street. Despite her petite frame, Jessica had a strong and determined personality. Her family life was marked by turmoil and instability. Her father had a history of run-ins with the law, including a conviction for manufacturing methamphetamines and a DUI arrest in the early 2000s. This tumultuous environment was not unique to Jessica's family. Many of her friends and neighbors also experienced similar struggles. Tragedy struck Jessica's life at a young age. In 2006, a neighbor was shot multiple times in his yard. Jessica's own life was also marked by difficulties. She struggled with her parents, had rocky relationships with boyfriends who had trouble with the law, and occasionally engaged in violent outbursts during arguments. These behaviors intensified when she was 17, following the death of her older brother, Alan, in a car accident in 2012. After her mother disapproved of her new boyfriend, Jessica moved out of the family home for several months. Jessica's life was marked by challenges from a young age. Her father had served time in prison, but by 2014, he had turned his life around and was working as a mechanic for the local sheriff's department. Despite her own brushes with the law, including selling illicit substances and associating with local gangs, Jessica was a well-liked and respected member of her community. Her warm smile and friendly demeanor made her death all the more shocking and mysterious. When a car fire broke out in her hometown, rumors quickly spread that Jessica was involved. Her father, due to his connection to the sheriff's department, was immediately informed about the incident. He quickly relayed the news to his wife, who rushed to tell Jessica's mother. They women arrived at the hospital while Jessica was still alive. The investigation into the fire that killed Jessica initially focused on the possibility of a car accident. However, this theory was quickly dismissed due to the lack of evidence, such as skid marks or damage to the vehicle. The burned car showed no signs of impact or damage, which further ruled out the accident theory. The primary theory shifted to arson. However, the police had limited leads and insufficient evidence, which hindered the investigation. To gather more information, investigators interviewed numerous individuals who had contact with Jessica in the days leading up to her death. The list of potential suspects included Jessica's boyfriend, who was in prison at the time of the arson. However, this theory was eventually dismissed due to his alibi, as he had been living in Iowa since their breakup. Ali Alai, the owner of a local gas station, also came under suspicion, as he was one of the last people to see Jessica alive. After providing a statement, Ali was released. Another theory suggested that Jessica's association with a local gang may have led to her death. However, the gang members denied any involvement and expressed their condolences to the Chambers family. Many of the individuals questioned during the investigation had motives to lie, even if they were not directly involved in Jessica's death. The investigation appeared to be at a standstill, with no clear suspect or motive for the brutal act. Jessica's last week of life was meticulously reconstructed by investigators. It was discovered that on December 5, 2014, she drove to the M&M Minimart after receiving a phone call. There, she purchased $14 worth of gasoline and departed at 5:15 p.m. Half an hour later, at 5:45 p.m., Jessica called her mother, saying she would be home soon. At that time, she was wearing camouflage pajama pants and had her hair pulled back in a bun. Jessica made several more stops. These included visiting an unknown house and driving to a nearby town. Surveillance footage captured a man wearing a striped shirt filling a gas can with fuel. Although it's unclear where he went afterward, he did seem to be heading in the same direction as Jessica. According to her phone records, she spent 10 to 15 minutes stopped at a traffic light on Highway 2, headed toward Batesville. However, there is a significant gap in the timeline, from 6:30 p.m. to 7:32 p.m., often referred to as the mystery hour. Further investigation eventually shed some light on these missing minutes. It's believed that during this time, Jessica continued driving to her eventual destination. Her phone's GPS confirmed that at 7:30 p.m., she reached Heron Road. Unfortunately, it was on this very spot that her car would be discovered on fire. The investigation into Jessica Chambers' disappearance and death progressed slowly until December 2015, when 17 suspected gang members were arrested on unrelated charges. During plea negotiations, the gang members identified Quentin Tellis as someone who was with Jessica just an hour before the fire, after being offered a chance to cooperate with the investigation. The investigation focused on Quentin Tellis after reviewing Jessica's social media and cell phone activity. Tellis initially claimed he only met Jessica once, but after further questioning and presenting all their messages, he was arrested and charged with Jessica's murder through arson. Text messages show Tellis sent Jessica intimate requests on the day of the tragedy. At 9:02 a.m., Jessica texted Quentin, and he replied. Tellis texted, "I'm ready," at 10:09 a.m. and was picked up by Jessica shortly after. They picked up a friend at 10:49 a.m. and dropped Quentin off at 2:03 p.m. Tellis messaged Jessica again, asking for intimacy, his fourth such request in 4 days. Recovered deleted texts included, "I'm excited," and "Come lie with me," which Jessica ignored. The passenger seat in Jessica's burned car was pushed back, suggesting intimacy. Prosecutors argued this was evidence of their activities that evening. Tellis was charged with Jessica's murder and arson on February 24th. The investigation took time to build a case. The first trial began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, with strict security measures in place. Prosecutor John Champion warned jurors of disturbing images of burned victim Jessica Chambers and 35 witnesses. Jessica met Quentin Tellis, 7 years her senior, around Thanksgiving 2014. FBI agent Dustin Blunt testified that Tellis met Jessica at a gas station through a friend and they spent intimate time together. Quentin Tellis had sent Jessica Chambers text messages requesting intimacy, even on the day of her death. The front seat of her burned car was adjusted downward, as Tellis had described. Tellis attempted to strangle Chambers, then set her on fire. Tellis confessed to investigators that he saw Chambers that night and they went to a fast food restaurant together. However, his alibi couldn't be confirmed, and he was seen on a store surveillance camera purchasing a phone card. Tellis didn't testify in his own defense. Prosecutors pointed to text messages where Tellis repeatedly requested intimacy from Chambers, who consistently denied him. FBI agent Dustin Blunt shared that Tellis deleted Chambers' contact information and text messages from his phone after her death. Tellis claimed he did this because he didn't want Chambers' number in his phone. Tellis and Chambers met through a friend at a gas station, and they had been intimate at some point. Tellis' DNA was found on Chambers' keys, and his cell phone records placed him at the location on the night of the fire. Despite this, Tellis maintained his innocence. Defense attorney Darla Palmer urged jurors to disregard the cell phone location evidence, arguing it couldn't prove Tellis and Chambers were at the same place. Tellis' family claims the police are looking for someone to blame in a highly charged racial issue. The first trial ended in a mistrial due to confusion over jury instructions. By the time of the retrial in 2018, Quentin Tellis was under investigation in Louisiana for the end-of-life of student Ming-Chin Hsia, as well as for the illegal use of a stolen bank card. In May 2019, he was charged with second-degree murder in connection with Hsia's demise. The second trial was notably challenging. Jurors were shown a photo of Jessica Chambers, which firefighter Cole had taken upon arriving at the scene. Cole was deeply disturbed by the image of Chambers, whose lips were severely burned and blackened with soot. Cole told the jurors that the photo Cole took of Chambers was etched in her memory, and she saw it every morning and every night. A veteran firefighter also testified that he had never seen a victim with such severe burns. When he found Chambers, she was lying on the ground, struggling to speak, and was sitting on a blanket. Her hair was singed, and her nose and mouth were surrounded by blisters that covered her entire body. Testimonies at the second hearing also included a woman named Sherry Flowers, who had not appeared at the first trial of Tellis but told investigators during questioning that she had picked up a hitchhiker on the night Jessica Chambers was tragically ended. Sherry Flowers did not recognize Tellis in court and agreed with the prosecutor that she did not know whom she had picked up. However, she told the court that a man flagged her down, and she stopped because she thought it was her cousin. She agreed to give a ride to the man, whom she described as an African-American male, about 20 years old, and of slim to medium build. Tellis, who was 5 feet and 9 inches tall, was 26 at the time. Initially, Flowers did not reach out to investigators, and when asked why in court, she said, "I couldn't remember," and thought it wasn't relevant to the case. Nevertheless, the prosecutors attempted to link this ride to the demise of Jessica Chambers, suggesting it provided Quentin Tellis with the opportunity to leave Jessica's car in order to return and set it on fire. However, the defense contested the timing, and Flowers admitted that she was unsure of the exact time of the ride. The investigator presented evidence that Jessica Chambers' keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near the location where Tellis was picked up. However, the defense argued that it was impossible to prove where the keys had been at the time of the crime, and therefore, they should not be admitted as evidence. Despite the emotional testimony, the second jury was unable to reach a verdict in 2018, just like the first jury 2 years earlier. As a result, Quentin Tellis was not convicted of setting Jessica Chambers and her car on fire, and the case remains unsolved. However, many people continue to investigate the case online, searching for clues that may have been missed and developing their own theories about who was responsible for Jessica Chambers' death. The Jessica Chambers case began to garner widespread attention immediately after her death, but as the media's interest declined, internet sleuths around the world picked up the case. To this day, the mystery surrounding her final hours remains one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. On the night of the crime, Jessica left her house at 5 p.m. and told her mother she was heading to a nearby gas station. Security footage shows Jessica stopping at the gas station twice. During one of those visits, she pumped gas and then went towards the store, where she waved at someone off camera. Despite efforts to identify the person Jessica was waving at, the mystery remains unsolved. Although Quentin Tellis, 29, has been identified as the prime suspect, he is still incarcerated for a different crime. Consequently, justice for Jessica has yet to be achieved. Tragically, Lisa, Jessica's mother, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52, without seeing her daughter's case reach a conclusive outcome. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lizzie Marriott. In the fall of 2012, Lizzie Marriott began her studies in marine biology at the University of New Hampshire. To reduce her living expenses, she moved out of her family home in Massachusetts, where she lived with her parents, Bob and Melissa Lizzie, and relocated to Chester to live with her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hanna. Lizzie quickly became a beloved member of her aunt and uncle's family. She had a passion for marine animals, which led her to pursue a degree in marine biology. Although she was now 2 hours away from her parents, they remained close and kept in regular contact. Lizzie was known for her kind, gentle, and sweet nature, which made her a favorite among those who knew her. Lizzie's aunt recalled that whenever Lizzie came home, she'd exclaim, "I'm home," and it filled their hearts with joy. Lizzie was thriving in her new life, with new opportunities opening up in her free time. She had found a job at Target, where she quickly fit in and earned respect from her colleagues. That's where she met Kate McDonough, an 18-year-old who quickly became a close friend. They girls often hung out after work, and one day, Kate invited Lizzie over to her apartment. On subsequent invitations, Lizzie was happy to accept. Lizzie and Kate planned a cozy evening with dinner and a movie on October 9th. However, Kate's boyfriend Seth joined them, bringing a lively atmosphere. Seth was a man of many talents, with a theater arts background and a black belt in karate. Lizzie's family and friends expected a fun evening together. When she failed to return home at the agreed-upon time, her relatives initially thought she might have stayed overnight at a friend's place and then headed to university. However, when she didn't show up the next day, her aunt and uncle grew concerned and contacted her parents, who were also unaware of her whereabouts. Lizzie's parents immediately drove to Chester, reporting their daughter's disappearance to the police along the way. The investigation began, and the police questioned everyone who knew Lizzie, but her relatives had no idea where she had gone. Fortunately, a friend named Nate revealed that he thought Lizzie might be with Kate McDonough. Nate asked Kate if she had seen Lizzie. Kate replied that she hadn't. Detectives began investigating the new information provided by Nate. In the meantime, they discovered that her bank accounts showed no activity and her phone was dead. This led them to rule out the initial theory that she might have been involved in an accident. Shortly after, her car was located. After interviewing her friends and co-workers, investigators gathered some information about Kate and her boyfriend, Seth. Lizzie and Kate's acquaintances have noticed they spending increasing amounts of time together, despite their vastly different personalities. Outwardly, Lizzie is sociable and compassionate, whereas Kate is known for being rude. The reason behind their close relationship remains unclear. Lizzie was once a cheerful person, but after meeting Seth, she changed. Her co-workers noticed a difference, and she distanced herself from relatives who disapproved of Seth's behavior. They started dating when Lizzie was 17 and moved in together in Dover, New Hampshire, after she turned 18. On October 12th, authorities questioned Kate and Seth separately but at the same time. This tactic helped investigators gather more information. For 2 hours, Kate consistently denied ever having met Lizzie on October 9th, but then she stopped cooperating completely with the investigation. Seth, on the other hand, was more open with the details. He contradicted Kate's account, saying that Lizzie was actually at their place on the 9th. Seth described the events of that day, saying that he, Kate and Lizzie watched a movie together, played strip poker and then engaged in a consensual threesome. However, the situation becomes tragic when things don't go as planned. Lizzie accidentally dies while tied with rope. Too shocked and afraid of being misunderstood, Seth and Kate decided to dump Lizzie's body into the Piscataqua River on Pierce Island. After being questioned for 11 hours, Seth accompanied police to the location and reenacted how he and Kate threw the body off the cliff. Lizzie's parents doubted Seth's account of her death, insisting she was in a loving relationship with Brittany and wouldn't cheat or take her own life. They urged police to find her body for a proper burial. The search continued with volunteers and a detective, but strong river currents made it possible her body was swept to the Atlantic. The investigation into Lizzie's death continued with a search of Seth's apartment. Detectives found the apartment cluttered and disorganized, with evidence of Seth's interest in occultism and black magic. A search of the surrounding area turned up a bag in a trash container containing black leather gloves, a sweatshirt, and men's underwear with DNA from both Seth and Lizzie, confirming their intimate relationship. The sweatshirt was identified as Lizzie's by her family. Later, Kate McDonough confirmed some of his account. According to Kate, she, Seth, and Lizzie spent the evening of October 9th watching a movie and playing strip poker, which eventually led to a consensual intimate encounter involving rope bondage, which Lizzie had agreed to. Lizzie Marriott was having a good time until she suddenly had a seizure, suffocated, and lost consciousness. She stopped breathing when Seth and Kate lifted her up. Kate thought it was an accident, but an unexpected witness's testimony took the investigation in a new direction. A young woman visited the police station, claiming to have crucial information about the Lizzie Marriott case and requesting to speak with the lead detectives. During the conversation, she introduced herself as Catherine Fish, Seth Mella's ex-girlfriend. Her statements implied that Seth was capable of murder. She revealed that Seth had once confided in her about a fantasy in which he took someone's life. To understand Catherine's testimony, it's essential to examine her past relationship with Seth. They met 10 years ago, and initially, Seth seemed attentive and caring. However, during their first intimate encounter, Catherine discovered Seth's interest in BDSM. Seth initially seemed great, but he revealed a cruel and controlling side over time. He didn't tolerate disagreement or boundaries. After sharing dark fantasies, Kinda felt trapped and scared, especially when Seth physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and refusing to let go despite her pleas. This incident shattered her illusions about their relationship. After moving to a new city, Kinda felt isolated and alone, dependent on Seth. As his behavior escalated, he introduced other women, proposing a polyamorous relationship. Kinda felt trapped, afraid to leave due to Seth's controlling behavior. It took months for her to gather the courage to escape the toxic relationship. In May 2014, Seth Mella appeared in court, facing not only intentional murder charges but also accusations of taking advantage of multiple individuals. Several people testified against him, including Kate McDonough. 2 months after Lizzie's death, Kate was arrested and held in custody on charges of obstructing justice and interfering with the investigation. During her time in custody, Kate had ample opportunity to reflect on the events and consider who she was protecting. While imprisoned, Kate and Seth stayed in close touch and envisioned a life together in a country where they could not be extradited. They shared dreams of getting married, starting a family, and building a future, but their escape plan stalled in the winter of 2012. Seth convinced his cellmate, Ryan Bachman, who was about to be released, to help their escape. The plan was for Ryan to use his bank account to withdraw money, buy drugs, and sell them to increase their initial investment. They intended to use the money to purchase guns, 2 cars, explosives, and a boat. Ryan had different intentions and chose to keep the money for himself, causing Seth to give up on their plan to escape. Meanwhile, authorities became aware of their scheme. Seth wrote to Kate and hinted at a reunion in the afterlife, suggesting he believed in its existence. This could imply that Seth was vaguely suggesting Kate should consider ending her life to join him in the afterlife. As time passed, Kate's thoughts became clearer, allowing her to make a more rational decision when the prosecutor's office presented her with a favorable deal in 2014. Under the agreement, Kate was required to reveal the truth about the events that occurred on the evening of October 9th, and in return, her potential 20-year prison sentence was significantly reduced to 3 years. This offer was especially beneficial in light of the circumstances that later came to light during the investigation. As part of their agreement, Kate acknowledged that she was deeply intimidated by Seth and followed his instructions without hesitation. Over time, Seth had slowly stripped Kate of her autonomy and stifled her ability to make decisions for herself. Approximately 6 weeks before the tragic event, Seth had asked Kate to arrange a threesome with someone else while she was away on a 10-day theater tour, but Kate was unable to find someone to participate. Over time, Seth's messages to Kate became increasingly aggressive, transitioning from giving her instructions to making threats. He warned her of severe consequences if she didn't meet his demands, which included bringing a friend to participate in his plan. Kate invited Lizzie to visit her at home, and Lizzie agreed because she trusted Kate and had been to her place before. However, Kate didn't tell Lizzie that Seth would also be there, as she knew Lizzie might be hesitant. Seth had seen Lizzie's photos and was eager to meet her. On October 9th, Seth arrived at Kate's apartment at 9 p.m. At first, Kate and Lizzie chatted together, and Seth joined in later, initially creating a light-hearted atmosphere with his jokes and friendly demeanor. As they watched a movie, Seth suggested playing strip poker, dimming the lights to create an intimate setting. Lizzie began to lose the game, eventually ending up in her underwear. In another round, Seth suggested kissing Kate, but she refused, explaining that she was in a committed relationship and found the idea unpleasant. Seth suggested leaving Lizzie alone, but she refused. He retrieved a rope and gloves from his room, returned, and strangled her with the rope before she could react. After killing Lizzie, Seth committed a further act of violence against her body. His girlfriend, Kate, was present but did not intervene, claiming she was too scared to act. She feared that she would become the next victim if she tried to help. Later, at around 1 a.m., Seth and his girlfriend wrapped Lizzie's body in tarpaulin and placed it in a suitcase. They then transported the suitcase to Lizzie's car and drove to Pierce Island by the river. From the observation deck, they removed Lizzie's body from the suitcase and threw it off the cliff. After the incident, Kate and another person cleaned up inside her car. Then they drove to the campus parking lot, where Kate parked her vehicle. From the parking lot, they walked a 10-mile distance to Kate's home. The experience left Kate severely shaken, and she went into shock. She was also fearful of testifying against Seth in the future, worrying that he might intimidate or silence her due to concerns for her safety. During the trial, Kate's excessive sobbing raised suspicions, with some doubting her emotional display and suggesting she was a skilled actress. Kate's defense claimed that Lizzie's death was an accident during intimacy, but acknowledged that Seth and Kate had disposed of the body. They alleged that Seth isolated and coerced Kate, affecting her mental state. The prosecution focused on deliberate murder, citing the discovery of gloves at the scene, which suggested premeditation. Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, acquaintances of Seth Mella, testified for the prosecution. After Lizzie's murder, Seth called them at 10:49 p.m. asking for help. When they arrived after 11 p.m., they found Seth on the bed next to Kate McDonough in lingerie. Seth said, "This time things went too far." Roberta found Kate in the kitchen and suggested calling an ambulance. They chose not to intervene or contact police, avoiding involvement. Seth Mella was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy in 2014, receiving a life sentence without parole. Kate McDonough, who was 20 at the time, got a 3-year sentence as part of a plea deal and was released in 2016. She has since maintained a low profile. Lizzie Marriott's parents, Bob and Melissa, do not feel the sentence is sufficient. They hope her case can serve as a warning to others, especially women. They created a memorial bench in her hometown since her body was never recovered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Wright. Susan Lucille Wright was born on April 24, 1976, in Houston, Texas, to parents Velma Sue and Jimmy Lawrence Wright. She was the eldest of 2 children and had a biological sister named Cindy. As a child, Susan was active, sociable, and creatively talented. During her school years, she developed a passion for dancing and aspired to become a choreographer. With her bright and attractive appearance, as well as her slender figure, she drew many admirers and being the center of attention. After completing high school, Susan tried but was unsuccessful in getting into college. To raise funds for her future education, she decided to take some time off. During this period, she found work as a dancer at a well-known nightclub, performing partially nude on stage. She decided to leave her job and use her savings to enroll in evening courses at a nursing school. To support herself and maintain her independence, Susan took a job as a waitress at a restaurant while pursuing her studies. However, she soon discovered that medicine was not her real passion and had trouble paying for her studies. Consequently, she stopped attending her classes to concentrate on her job. In the summer of 1997, 21-year-old Susan met her future husband, Jeffrey Andrew Wright, at the Galveston restaurant where she worked. He was immediately drawn to her beauty and radiant smile, becoming a regular customer and leaving generous tips. After some time, Jeffrey mustered the courage to ask Susan for her phone number. He would call her daily, sometimes multiple times a day, to arrange romantic dates and surprise her with small gestures, such as sending flowers with heartfelt notes to her workplace. In the evenings, he would meet her and walk her home. The man was 8 years older than Susan, but she didn't consider this a significant issue. He was charming, attentive, and caring, which quickly won her over. However, it soon became apparent that Jeffrey struggled with alcohol and substance abuse. He claimed to have overcome his addiction to drugs and promised to quit drinking entirely. Susan, being young and in love for the first time, believed him. She thought that their love could conquer any obstacle. Shortly after, Susan discovered she was pregnant and excitedly shared the news with Jeffrey. Although he seemed pleased about becoming a father, he didn't take any decisive action, such as proposing or suggesting they move in together. Confused by Jeffrey's behavior, Susan took matters into her own hands. She insisted that their child should be born within a married family, and Jeffrey agreed to her terms. By the time they officially got married, Susan was already 8 months pregnant. They chose to have a quiet, intimate wedding without guests or celebrations, rather than a grand ceremony. Around this time, they purchased a home in a quiet area of Harris County, Texas, and moved in a couple of weeks before the birth of their child. In December 1998, they welcomed their first child, a son named Bradley, and appeared to be the perfect family. In 2001, Susan became pregnant again, and in the spring of 2002, she gave birth to a daughter named Kay. The family had a small dog named Buck, a comfortable family car. Jeffrey worked at a local construction company, and after the children were born, Susan became a stay-at-home mom by mutual agreement. She took care of the kids and created a cozy home environment. The neighbors said that Mrs. Susan was a kind person, friendly, sociable, a caring mother, and a loving wife. However, it was later revealed that the reality of their family life was far from perfect. Her husband was extremely demanding in every aspect of their lives. Susan's days were filled with cleaning, doing laundry, and cooking. Jeffrey demanded freshly cooked meals every day, prohibiting her from preparing meals in advance or reheating leftovers. Maintaining a perfect and clean home was a challenging task, especially with 2 small children. Additionally, Jeffrey required his clothes to be washed almost daily, as he refused to wear the same item twice. If Susan failed to meet these expectations, she faced insults, humiliation, and even physical abuse. Moreover, Jeffrey was extremely frugal, providing Susan with a meager weekly allowance of $100 to cover all household expenses, including cooking, childcare, and maintenance. Susan had to keep track of every expense, giving receipts to her husband Jeffrey. However, Jeffrey's behavior was a bigger issue. Despite promising to quit drinking, he continued and started using drugs, downplaying it as light doping for work stress. The substances made him aggressive, causing him to harm Susan and their son. Jeffrey denied his behavior was a problem, claiming Susan knew about his substance use before marriage. His parents sympathized with Susan but felt powerless to intervene. After moving in together, Jeffrey's behavior became increasingly aggressive, leading to physical, emotional, and intimate abuse. He initially apologized, but the violence became regular. Jeffrey would often go to the gym 3 times a week to practice boxing as a stress relief measure. He looked forward to sharing this activity with his son when the boy was older. On January 13, 2003, Jeffrey returned home from the gym agitated and on edge. As Susan prepared dinner, he attempted to teach their 5-year-old son some boxing moves but lost control and struck the child, causing the boy to burst into tears. Susan pretended not to notice the incident, but it was the last straw for her. Following dinner, she put the kids to bed. Meanwhile, Jeffrey stayed in the bedroom, where he continued to take drugs. There are different accounts of what happened next. According to Susan, when she went into the room, Jeffrey assaulted her, attempted to rape her, and tried to stab her with a knife. She claimed she fought back in self-defense after managing to take the knife from him. The events that followed are unclear, with different accounts of what happened. According to Susan, when she entered the bedroom, Jeffrey tried to attack her, sexually assault her, and kill her with a knife. However, she claims she managed to grab the knife and defended herself, leading to a fight. Her story changed multiple times, but the version told in court, based on the investigation, was considered more believable. Susan decided to use her dance skills to distract her husband and lower his guard. Wearing a short silk robe over her bare body, she put on a seductive show for Jeffrey. She then suggested a role-playing game that involved tying him up, which he agreed to. Using 3 of Jeffrey's neckties, she bound his hands and one leg to the bed. She used the silk belt from her robe to secure his other leg. With Jeffrey immobilized, Susan created a makeshift gag using her underwear, pretending it was part of the intimate game. To set the mood, she lit candles and turned off the lights. Jeffrey was tied to the bed with a gag in his mouth, unable to move or speak. The room was dimly lit. Jeffrey poured hot wax from a candle onto Jeffrey's chest, which was painful but initially seemed like part of a game they were playing. However, when she poured wax onto his genital area, the pain became unbearable. Jeffrey tried to free himself and scream, but he couldn't. His wife, Susan, took a small sharp knife from the kitchen and began stabbing him repeatedly, starting at his groin and moving up his body, slashing his genitals, legs, abdomen, chest, arms, neck, and face. She began slowly, expressing her grievances with each stab, recounting the insults, humiliations, and abuse she had suffered. As she continued, Susan began to cry and stab faster. Experts later counted 193 shallow knife wounds on Jeffrey's body. Most of these wounds were not fatal, and Jeffrey was conscious for most of the ordeal. Susan's actions suggested she was in a state of extreme emotional distress. Her lawyers argued that she was in a state of affect, unable to stop even when Jeffrey showed no signs of life. She had not considered what she would do next or how she would handle the body. Shallow grave in the backyard. She sat next to her husband's body on the floor for hours. Eventually, she looked around the blood-covered bedroom and knew she had to act before dawn. She carefully checked outside through the window, ensuring the coast was clear. Her gaze landed on a shallow pit in the backyard that Jeffrey had dug for a fountain over the weekend. A plan formed instantly. This pit would become her despised husband's grave. To move the body, Susan used a garden wheelbarrow. This raised questions for investigators, as a petite woman was able to single-handedly lift and transport a man twice her weight out of the house. Suspicions of an accomplice arose but were never confirmed. Under the cover of darkness, Susan discreetly relocated the body to the pit and covered it with a thin layer of soil. She then cleaned up, removing the blood-stained curtains and bed linen, placing them in trash bags and dispersing them in different bins. The blood-soaked mattress was flipped over, as Susan was unsure how to properly clean it. She spent the remaining time until dawn scrubbing blood from the floor, walls, and carpet. Scrubbing the carpet is a big deal, with a large stain that couldn't be removed. In an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the violent confrontation, Susan applied bleach to the affected area, hoping the chemicals would destroy any remaining traces. Susan made a distressing call to her husband's parents in Austin, Texas. She was emotional as she recounted the events. Her husband, under the influence, had physically assaulted her and their son, spilled bleach on the carpet, and then ended their relationship before leaving. Jeffrey's parents were shocked and concerned by the news. Although they were aware that their son had his flaws, they felt genuine sympathy for their daughter-in-law. However, when they learned that he had hit their grandchild, they immediately offered for Susan and the children to come and stay with them. Despite their willingness to help, the young mother declined their offer. She added that she planned to file a police report and reveal all the incidents that had occurred at their residence. 2 days later, Susan visited the police station as her husband's sudden disappearance raised increasing concerns and action was necessary. Susan reported that she and her children had been victims of domestic violence perpetrated by her husband and required protection. She successfully obtained a restraining order against her husband, preventing him from approaching her and the children, although she was already aware that he would never be able to come near them again. As evidence, Susan presented bruises and cuts on her arms, which she alleged were inflicted by her husband using keys when she attempted to defend herself. Additionally, Susan had a small bruise on his face and corroborated that his father had struck him. At first, the tearful woman's story seemed believable and logical. She claimed her husband, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had attacked her and their young son. Then, realizing what he had done, he became scared and fled. However, over time, suspicions grew because Jeffrey had not contacted anyone. He appeared to have run away without his belongings, documents, or mobile phone. He didn't show up for work or visit his parents, and none of his friends or neighbors had seen him. It was as if he had vanished. Susan found it unbearable to stay in the house where she confronted her husband. She couldn't shake the feeling he was still alive and would rise for revenge. She was losing her grip on reality. Even their dog Buck sensed it, constantly barking and trying to dig up the yard where Jeffrey was buried. On January 17th, Susan went to her mother's house with her children. When her mother saw her daughter in person, she fully realized the severity of the situation. Even though she had already been aware of it, Velma directly asked if she had killed her husband, and her daughter broke down in tears, nodding in admission. The daughter then confessed to the crime, revealing the location of her husband's body, and repeatedly expressed uncertainty about what to do next. Following her mother's advice, Susan reached out to lawyer Neil Davis the next day and confessed to killing her husband and attempting to cover up the crime. After gathering all the details, the experienced defense attorney considered possible scenarios and contacted the Harris County District Attorney's Office on January 19th. Davis reported Susan's confession, including the burial of her husband's body in their backyard, and stated that she was willing to provide a full statement at the police station. On January 24, 2003, Susan voluntarily went to the police station, intent on making a full confession. However, her account was disjointed, with confusing details and occasional contradictions. She sometimes referred to her late husband as if he were still alive, expressed fear of him, and requested protection. Consequently, Susan underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The results revealed she had suffered a nervous breakdown and was experiencing depression. Despite this, the evaluation found that Susan was still capable of understanding the actions she had taken. When investigators uncovered the remains of Jeffrey from the makeshift grave in the backyard, they were shocked by the brutality of the scene, having never encountered. Experts counted a total of 193 knife wounds on the victim's body, distributed across various areas, including the groin, legs, shoulders, arms, abdominal area, chest, neck, and face. The majority of these wounds were superficial, meaning they were not life-threatening on their own. However, one head wound was severe enough to have caused death. The large number of superficial wounds suggests that the victim endured a prolonged and agonizing death, likely while still conscious, as his wife repeatedly stabbed him with a small knife. The victim's wrists and ankles showed deep marks from the ties and belt used to bind him. These injuries indicated that the victim had attempted to free himself but was unsuccessful. The ties and belt were still on the body when it was found. Additionally, there were traces of candle wax on the victim's chest and groin area. Susan claimed that the candle wax was an accident, resulting from her husband knocking over a lit candle. However, the prosecution argued that the hot wax was more likely used as a form of torture to inflict suffering on the bound victim. Furthermore, the victim's mouth contained his wife's underwear, which acted as a gag to prevent him from screaming or calling for help. Toxicological tests showed the deceased had alcohol and several controlled substances in his system, which could have led to aggressive and irrational behavior. Initially, the bedroom where the confrontation occurred seemed normal, except for a large bleach stain on the carpet. However, upon closer inspection using special chemical agents and equipment, it became clear that Susan had spent considerable time cleaning up the scene. Once wiped away blood traces were revealed, the true extent of the violence became apparent. Blood was found throughout the room, including on the ceiling, and the mattress was saturated with it. The trial began in late February 2004, with Susan having already spent a year in custody. Her children were being cared for by her parents and sister Cindy. Her lawyer was well prepared, having worked extensively with Susan to build her case. During the trial, Susan frequently broke down in tears as she recounted the events of that horrific night and the abuse she suffered leading up to it. She claimed to have endured years of cruelty and violence at the hands of her husband. The defendant, Susan, claimed that on the evening of the incident, her husband returned home from training in an agitated state. He began demonstrating boxing techniques to their 5-year-old son, Bradley, and said the boy would also take up boxing. When Bradley refused, his father hit him in the face. Susan put the children to bed and then tried to have a serious talk with her husband, urging him to seek help at a clinic. However, he became angry, grabbed his keys, and tried to leave. Susan attempted to stop him, which led to a struggle that caused injuries to her palms and wrists. According to Susan, her husband then struck her, causing her to fall and momentarily lose her bearings. After regaining composure, Susan saw her husband Jeffrey holding a knife, but her testimony became inconsistent. Her lawyer argued she was in a state of affect, leading her to seize the knife and strike Jeffrey. Susan claimed she secured him to a cart with ties and a belt after the confrontation, and candle wax accidentally landed on his body. However, the defendant had no explanation for why her underwear was found in the victim's mouth. In contrast, the prosecution presented a more convincing and logical case. Expert testimony revealed that the victim's wrist and ankle wounds were inflicted before death, likely as part of a ruse to restrain the victim. This also provided a plausible explanation for the gag in the victim's mouth. Additionally, the angle of the injuries suggested that the perpetrator was positioned on top of the victim, rather than struggling with him, which would have resulted in different injury patterns. All the cuts on the victim were inflicted from the front, indicating that the attack occurred while he was lying on his back, unable to move. It was unclear whether Susan had planned her husband's murder in advance and intentionally used the pit he dug for a fountain as a makeshift grave. Prosecutors, however, suspected that she had carefully orchestrated the crime, motivated by the potential insurance payout. The case drew widespread media attention, with Susan being labeled the blue-eyed butcher or blonde meat grinder by the press. Jeffrey's family demanded the harshest possible sentence, while many of their neighbors felt sorry for Susan, recalling instances where she had bruises that she attributed to her own clumsiness, but which may have been signs of physical abuse. Prosecutors initially sought a life sentence for Susan, but later reduced their request to 45 years in prison. In March 2004, she was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. She showed no emotion when the judge delivered the verdict, appearing detached from the proceedings. A year later, her lawyer's attempt to appeal the decision was rejected. In 2008, Susan and her defense team filed another appeal, which was influenced by new testimony from a previously unknown witness. Misty McKell, wife of former NFL champion Steve McKell, was a key witness. She had a lengthy relationship with Jeffrey Wright in the mid-1990s and was briefly engaged to him. However, she suffered physical abuse, humiliation, and cruel treatment from Jeffrey, leading her to end the engagement and cut ties. Following this new information in Jeffrey's testimony, Susan's prison sentence was reduced to 20 years. She became eligible for parole in 2014 at age 38 but was denied. A second denial followed in July 2017. After 16 years in prison, Susan Wright was released in the winter of 2020 at age 44. She was met by reporters and photographers, causing her to break down in tears and ask to be left alone. Her trial received extensive media coverage, including a broadcast on Court TV. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vashti Seacat. Brad Seacat was born on March 3, 1976, in Kingman, Kansas, to Janet Seacat and her husband, whose identity and background remain undisclosed due to a previous marriage. Janet had a son, Robert, from a prior marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Seacat family has a history of good law enforcement, leading to a strict and disciplined home environment. Although details about Brad's childhood are scarce, it is known that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was physically strong and athletic, which led him to participate in high school wrestling and bodybuilding. His efforts paid off as he excelled in inter-school tournaments, often taking first place and gaining recognition as a star wrestler and prominent figure in his school. At 16, Brad met Vashti Seacat at a major wrestling competition at the Kansas City Coliseum. Vashti was born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, to Julie Hosteler and Clinton Forrest. She was the third of 4 children, with an older brother, Rich, and sister, Catherine, and a younger sister, Tyler. Vashti was a social person with many friends, but she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. However, this didn't hold her back from becoming a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team. She enjoyed watching the team win and attended every match, including the one where she met Brad. Brad was immediately smitten with Vashti and asked her out. Impressed by his confidence, she accepted, and they felt an instant connection at their first meeting. From that moment on, they were inseparable. After high school, Vashti attended a university, while he followed in his family's footsteps by enrolling in the police academy. As a result, they spent less time together, which caused Brad was starting to exhibit controlling and possessive behavior. Over time, Brad's growing jealousy became unbearable for Vashti, and she eventually ended the relationship. Although the breakup was not dramatic or traumatic, it marked the end of their romance. After graduating from the police academy, Brad joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, a short distance from Kingman. Despite his professional accomplishments, he couldn't shake off the feeling of emptiness. He still had strong feelings for Vashti, and his love for her lingered deep within him. Brad didn't abandon his dream of reuniting with Vashti, and as soon as the chance presented itself, he visited her. His words struck a chord with Vashti, who sensed his sincerity, possibly due to his devotion to faith or genuine affection. This led her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brad hastily approached Vashti's family to express his true intentions and request her hand in marriage. The Seacat family was thrilled to hear the news, convinced that their marriage would be a successful one. The wedding took place in 2004, after which Brad and Vashti settled in a neighborhood in Kingman. As they began building their new life, they befriended Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to backyard barbecues. Brad's unpleasant behavior causing problems due to his controlling personality. However, when Vashti became pregnant, their issues appeared to fade away. In 2006, they welcomed their first son, Brandon, and 2 years later, their second son, Bronson. Although Brad was a loving father, he sometimes had a rough way of interacting with the children, especially during playtime. He treated the children like adults and occasionally showed a more aggressive side. Brad's behavior was concerning. He once beat a prisoner by hitting his head against a concrete wall, causing a fractured skull and brain damage. The prisoner later died from his injuries. Brad was sued for using excessive force, but his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve, supported him, and the charges were eventually dropped. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing Brad of any wrongdoing. Brad showed no remorse for his actions and even admitted to his colleagues that he liked to use violence, especially against individuals he considered bad people. On a separate occasion, Brad and another officer restrained a defendant who became unruly and resisted being removed from the courtroom for contempt of the judge. This incident earned them recognition, and the police chief awarded both officers bronze medals for their actions. On the other hand, Vashti wants to pursue her career despite her love for her children. She searched for a job and succeeded with her efforts. She became the new human resources director at Vito Communications Company. However, Brad seemed unhappy about her new role. He wants Vashti to focus only on family work and her children's education. As a result, he started complaining about Vashti spending too much time at the office. The number of arguments between Vashti and Brad increased significantly. Despite her best efforts to repair their marriage for the sake of their children, Vashti feels her efforts are in vain. She had a feeling that their situation would eventually end in disaster. To resolve the conflict, Vashti and Brad began attending sessions with social worker Connie Sodman. During her first sessions, Vashti expressed feelings of extreme loneliness and isolation, suggesting that couples therapy sessions might be their last hope to save their marriage. Every time Vashti mentioned the possibility of divorce, Brad became angry. For weeks, he repeatedly threatened to kill her if she left him, boasting that he could take her life without consequences because he was a police officer. He claimed he could make her murder look like a suicide, and even mentioned burning down their house to destroy the evidence. After the argument, Brad threatened her, saying that if Vashti pursued a divorce, he would prevent her from seeing their children, even taking them out of the country if necessary. At the same time, Brad left his police job and began working as a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashti continued to attend therapy sessions and made positive changes in her life, such as exercising regularly and eating healthier. A few months later, Vashti's social life began to flourish. She makes new connections at work and meets someone she is attracted to. However, she confided in her sister about her new relationship out of fear that Brad might find out and take revenge. Vashti openly shared with her colleagues about the various threats she received from her husband. Unbeknownst to her, Brad discovered her personal diary and brought it to his office, where he scanned and printed out many pages. He then spends his days researching topics including suicide, fire injuries, and the difference between murder and suicide. In the first week of April 2011, Vashti had her final counseling session with Connie to prepare for her divorce from Brad. Together, they created a safety plan for Vashti and their children. When Brad received his divorce papers on April 29th, he overreacted. After discovering the papers, Brad finds a projector in the pantry and uses it to enlarge a handwritten note from Vashti's diary. At the same time, he also wrote a farewell message to his children. What's amazing is that he also printed out documents on how to disguise a murder as a suicide. Additionally, Brad asked the maintenance staff how to properly destroy computer hard drives, and he used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained images that were unfavorable to him. Then he threw the rest in the trash. Later that day, Brad bought gas at a convenience store and put it in his truck. That evening, he asked Vashti if he could spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children and promised to leave the next morning. However, he also tries to persuade Vashti to reconsider the divorce and becomes increasingly threatening when she refuses to change her mind. Vashti and Brad had a disagreement that evening which resulted in Vashti going to bed exhausted around 3:15 a.m. Meanwhile, Brad entered the bedroom with a gun and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake and watching TV thought she heard gunshots but felt it wasn't concerning enough. Brad then staged his suicide by placing the gun next to Vashti's body. He poured gasoline into the hallway and upstairs bedroom and took Vashti's phone to call himself, creating an alibi. After getting his children, Brendan and Bronson, to a safe location, Brad started a fire. The fire spread quickly, engulfing the main room and igniting the remaining cartridges in the gun. At 3:45 a.m., neighbors were startled awake by the fire. Shortly thereafter, at around 7 a.m., Brad called 911, reporting that his wife had taken her own life. When emergency responders arrived, the first floor of the house was on fire and Brad was waiting in the car with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was still in the house, and Brad said that only his wife was there. He fabricated a story that Vashti had shot herself out of depression, and before doing that, she asked him to take the children to a safe place. Brad claimed he tried to save Vashti but was unable to do so because of the intense smoke and fire. When firefighters finally extinguished the blaze, they discovered Vashti's body on the bed in the master bedroom. An important detail attracted the attention of investigators. A .44 caliber revolver was found below Vashti's body, the barrel pointed toward her feet, and a 5-gallon gasoline barrel lay middle of the bed. 2 days later, investigators found Vashti's diary in her car, which contained a handwritten note and a suicide note. Forensic examination revealed that Vashti died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head and also suffered gunshot wounds to the torso and thighs. However, blood and lung tests showed no signs of smoke or carbon monoxide inhalation, which is typically present in the body of a person killed in a fire. The extent of the burns on Vashti's body made it impossible to determine whether her death was a murder or suicide. Police discovered some inconsistencies in Brad's story. It is worth noting that there was no dirt, blood, or wound on his body. Additionally, the position of the gun with the barrel pointing downward raises suspicions that this was not a suicide. Special Agent David Fetty of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation questioned how the gun came to be under the body. He pointed out that if Vashti shot herself while lying down, the gun would fall to the floor. If she sat up, the gun would still be on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet does not support the theory that Vashti shot himself behind the right ear. David decides to investigate further when some details don't seem to add up. Police found documents explaining how to make a murder look like a suicide. While analyzing Vashti's diary entry, they noticed her handwriting did not match her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarr concluded that the note had been tampered with. Witnesses also reported seeing Brad destroy a computer hard drive the day before. A neighbor who heard the fatal gunshot testified that the incident occurred at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Brad called 911. This information confirms David's suspicions that something is wrong. Police arrested Brad on May 13, 2011 and charged him with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 other counts related to putting his sons, Brendan and Bronson, in danger. During interrogation, Brad claimed that Vashti felt insecure and depressed because of their troubled marriage and his threats to take the children away. Brad also claimed that after filing for divorce, Vashti was overcome with depression and remorse, so she set a fire and shot herself. However, the police did not believe his story. The trial began on June 10, 2013. Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley shared her account of the events with the jury, emphasizing that no one was more aware than the police of the devastation of fire and its destructive ability to erase evidence. Regarding the projector, the defendant claimed that he only used this device for practical training to guide students. A forensic examiner testified about a forged letter and the destruction of a hard drive. The defendant claimed that he destroyed the hard drive to protect personal information, not to hide anything. The defendant's attorney, Roger Falk, argued that Vashti had suffered from depression since high school, a condition that had worsened after taking some kind of sedative. Brad's brother testified in court, corroborating his brother's account that Vashti had been depressed and sad for weeks before her death. In contrast, therapist Can reported that although Vashti was initially depressed due to marital circumstances, it was not a clinical mental health problem. The therapist said Vashti has been very worried about her future lately. Vashti's brother also recounting the emotional turmoil Vashti's children had endured as a result of their parents' circumstances. The prosecution portrayed Brad as a manipulative person who used his police powers to distort the truth. Yet the defense repeatedly argued that Vashti's death was a suicide and pointed out that even the medical examiner could not determine the cause of her death. Brad testified in his own defense, describing himself as a loving husband and devoted father who was saddened by his wife's desire for a divorce. Kingman County Judge Larry Solomon was accused by Brad that the judge had an incentive to rule against him to win a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. However, the jury ultimately found Brad guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Solomon sentenced Brad to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and an additional 6 years for other crimes. Brad will not be eligible for parole until he has served more than 31 years. In handing down the sentence, the judge took into account Brad's not guilty plea, his dishonest attempt to avoid responsibility, and his lack of remorse. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Roberson. Bianca Roberson, born on October 17, 1998, Bianca grew up to be a remarkable individual. She excelled at Bayard Rustin High School, earning straight A's and graduating with honors. Her impressive academic record earned her a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University in Florida, where she planned to major in criminal justice and pursue her dream of becoming an FBI forensic agent. Bianca was a multi-talented young woman who had been involved in various activities throughout her life. She was a Girl Scout, a cheerleader, and a basketball player. She also had a passion for music, taking lessons in flute, violin, clarinet, and guitar. Additionally, she was an artist. Bianca lived with her mother and maternal grandmother, Josephine Perry, and was excited to experience the independence and challenges of dorm life. However, her plans were tragically cut short. On June 28, 2017, Bianca, her mother, and grandmother went shopping at Walmart to prepare for her upcoming move to Florida. Bianca Roberson was tragically killed in a car accident on a road she knew well. The incident occurred just 10 minutes after she left a Walmart parking lot. Witnesses quickly called 911, and first responders rushed to the scene. Unfortunately, paramedics were unable to save Bianca, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial observations suggested that Bianca's severe head injuries were caused by her car veering off the road. However, as police interviewed eyewitnesses, a crucial detail emerged. A witness reported that Bianca's car had collided with a red pickup truck, which had fled the scene without stopping. As she drove home to meet her granddaughter, Bianca's grandmother was worried about the traffic and wondered if it might be related to Bianca. However, she had no idea that the cause of the traffic jam was actually a car crash involving Bianca. When she arrived home, she was met with devastating news. 2 police officers were waiting to inform her that Bianca had been killed in the accident. For Michelle, Bianca's mother, the news was almost too much to bear. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Michelle, a nurse from Delaware County, was still grieving the loss of her 22-year-old son, ML James Rowley, who had passed away from a heart condition in 2013. She had hoped that time would ease her pain, but instead, it had only intensified with the loss of her daughter. Michelle Robertson is struggling to cope with the loss of her second child. "I'm just existing," she said, feeling lost and without purpose. Her children were her reason for getting up in the morning, and now she feels like a mom without kids. After her divorce from Rodney Robertson in 2006, they managed to put aside their differences and work together as amicable co-parents thanks to their daughter Bianca. Michelle acknowledged that their divorce was not easy, but Bianca's presence helped to calm the tension. "Bianca didn't like it when I spoke harshly to her mother, and she would correct me," he said. Bianca's love for her family, especially her father, brought them closer together. Rodney admitted that Bianca was his favorite, and her devotion to family was inspiring. Bianca's father proudly said that his daughter was one step closer to achieving her dream of becoming an FBI forensic specialist. Bianca was excited to be on her own, but her future career was her main focus. Her hard work had paid off, as she had received a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University, one of the 3 schools that had accepted her out of the 4 she had applied to. Bianca's father said she had also been accepted to Coastal Carolina and the University of Georgia. Investigators were seeking CCTV footage to confirm the initial belief that Bianca's car veered off the road after colliding with a red pickup truck. If this were the case, it would imply that Bianca's death was no accident, but rather a deliberate act that required the police to identify a perpetrator. However, the truth revealed during the investigation proved even more stunning. While awaiting the CCTV footage, a significant development in the case occurred. It was initially assumed that Bianca's death resulted from her car crashing and hitting her head. Yet, during the autopsy, forensic experts made a startling discovery: there was a bullet in Bianca's head. This revelation drastically altered the course of the investigation. What initially seemed like an accident and later a collision with a red pickup truck was revealed to be a death caused by a gunshot wound to the head. The autopsy report's findings prompted detectives to meet with Bianca's family, bringing devastating news that her death was no accident. This revelation sent shockwaves, especially for her mother, Michelle, who couldn't fathom why anyone would harm her daughter. Bianca had a close-knit relationship with those around her, and her family couldn't identify anyone who might have wished her harm. Desperate for answers, the Robertson family relied on investigators to identify the person responsible for Bianca's tragic death. Upon reviewing the security footage from the Walmart her family visited on the day of her death, detectives found no suspicious activity. The detectives closely examined the family's actions from the moment they left their cars to the time they departed the parking lot. They dismissed the possibility that someone from Walmart could have followed Bianca and shot her, as she had not argued with anyone during their visit. The family had simply shopped, loaded their purchases into Bianca's car, and left. The investigation suggested that the motive for Bianca's death might be linked to an incident that occurred while she was driving home on the highway. Bianca's mother recalled, "We packed all the bags into Bianca's car," referring to the 2009 Chevy Malibu they had purchased for her 16th birthday from CarMax. Michelle recalled that her mother had chosen the car Bianca was driving when she first got her permit. According to Michelle, Bianca's mother said that Bianca had gotten everything she wanted, but Michelle didn't think of her as spoiled. Instead, she believed Bianca was simply loved and also willing to work for the things she desired. In fact, Bianca started her first job at McDonald's when she was 15 and soon switched to a dietary aide position at the Whitehorse Village Retirement Community in Delaware County. Michelle remembered that she had received a large number of letters and cards from the residents at Whitehorse Village who adored Bianca. After the police obtained traffic footage from CCTV cameras, Michelle pointed out that there were no cameras at the exact location where Bianca veered off the road. However, there was a camera about a mile away. To help illustrate the location, Michelle suggested looking at Google Maps. According to the map, Bianca lost control of her car where 2 lanes merged into one. When investigators reviewed the recording, they found evidence that supported the account of Bianca's encounter with the driver of the red pickup truck. The footage showed they cars traveling side by side, approaching a point where their lanes merged into one. It's possible that the conflict began when one driver failed to yield to the other. Given the tragic outcome, investigators inferred that the driver of the red pickup truck might have been the one who fired the shot. However, the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read the pickup truck's license plates or see the driver's face. Nevertheless, from that point on, the driver of the pickup truck became the primary suspect in Bianca Roberson's death. Detectives were tasked with identifying the man, but they only had a blurry image to work with. After inquiring with Bianca's family members, it became clear that none of them knew anyone who owned a red pickup truck. The police then re-interviewed the witnesses who were present at the scene and those who had called 911, but unfortunately, none of them had caught a glimpse of the vehicle's license plate. The Bianca Roberson family has received an outpouring of support from friends, strangers, and people of all ages since Bianca's passing. A vigil was held just 2 days after her death, and many have reached out to share their stories and condolences. Bianca's family describes her as a selfless and compassionate person who always put the needs of others before her own. According to her mother, Michelle, Bianca would often take in children who were in need, even if it meant sneaking them into their home without permission. When confronted about her actions, Bianca would simply say that she wanted to help others in the same way she would want someone to help her if she were in a similar situation. This kind of empathy and kindness was evident in many aspects of Bianca's life, including the time she witnessed a car accident and immediately asked her mother if they could stop to help. A kind-hearted woman's first instinct was to invite those eating alone to join her family for dinner. In the aftermath of Bianca's car accident, investigators analyzed footage from distant cameras to determine the direction of the red pickup truck involved in the incident. To gather more details about the truck, including its brand, model, and license plate, they required higher quality footage. The police sought the public's assistance through the media, asking anyone with information about the truck to come forward. Following the accident, the pickup truck turned towards Poi Pike. To find evidence, detectives visited nearby houses and shops, searching for cameras that might have captured the truck. After an extensive search, they found a camera with good quality footage, taken around 5 minutes after witnesses called 911 to report Bianca's car accident. Upon analyzing this footage, detectives saw the red pickup truck driving by shortly after the incident. The investigation continued, but the license plate of the suspect's car remained unknown, and it was unclear if the car in the footage was the same one or just a similar vehicle. However, 2 days after the incident, a new lead emerged when a woman contacted the police, claiming to have seen the car they were searching for. She also reported seeing the driver's face. She described the car as a red pickup truck that overtook her, stopped at the Poi Pike intersection, and then turned left. This information was crucial in narrowing down the search area and also revealed that the pickup truck in the footage was not the actual suspect's vehicle, but rather a similar-looking truck. Her description helped a forensic artist create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white male, 25 to 35 years old, with brown hair and a stubble beard. The police released the suspect's sketch, hoping someone would recognize the person and come forward. They showed the sketch to Bianca's family, but no one recognized the individual. As the investigation continued, detectives began to consider the possibility that Bianca's death was a hate crime. To gather more evidence, the police canvassed the area where the red pickup truck was last seen, visiting homes and businesses near the intersection where it turned left. They were searching for a high-quality surveillance recording that could provide answers to their questions. Their efforts paid off when a homeowner, who lived less than half a mile from the intersection, provided the police with a recording from their driveway surveillance camera. By estimating the time it would take to drive from the crime scene to the homeowner's location, the police quickly found the relevant footage. Although the new footage was of better quality than the previous one, its angle made it impossible for the police to identify the car or its driver. The police worked hard to find another recording from a closer camera, and they got lucky. Although the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify some unique features of the car. These features included a sticker on the right side window, a vertical dent on the passenger door, and damage to the hood. With these details, the police had a much better chance of finding the car. The police sought the public's help in finding the truck and its driver by offering a $5,000 reward for any information that could aid in the investigation. They were confident that someone would recognize the distinctive vehicle. 3 days after Bianca Roberson's death, a lawyer contacted the police station on behalf of a client who wanted to turn himself in, stating that his client was connected to the incident that resulted in Bianca's death. The incident occurred on a recent Wednesday at approximately 5:30 p.m. Bianca Roberson, an 18-year-old who had just graduated from Westchester Ruston High School, was driving on Route 100, a two-lane highway, on her way to Jacksonville University. Her life was full of promise, with a loving family and a bright future ahead. As she approached the merge with Route 202, the road narrowed from 2 lanes to 1. A common merge on a southeastern Pennsylvania highway turned deadly last Wednesday when a dispute over positioning escalated into violence. Bianca Roberson was merging from 2 lanes to 1 when a man in a red pickup truck, also merging, became agitated and shot her in the head. The suspect, 28-year-old David Desper of Pennsylvania, surrendered to police with his lawyer. Although he refused to testify, he consented to a search of his home and revealed the location of his pickup truck. David was subsequently arrested and charged with Bianca Roberson's murder. The police tracked down the suspect's vehicle, a pickup truck, at a location David had previously mentioned. Unique features on the truck, such as stickers on the windows and damage to the body, made it unmistakably clear that it was the same truck involved in the crime. The investigators searched Davider's residence and found the firearm that was used to shoot and kill Bianca Roberson. Despite this major breakthrough in the case, the authorities remained baffled as to the killer's motivation. Over 800 loved ones and members of the community attended a heart-wrenching farewell ceremony at the St. Paul's Baptist Church in the suburban Westchester borough, which lies approximately 25 miles. During the funeral service, many people paid tribute to she, including her brothers, officials from her high school, the chief admissions officer from the university she was set to attend, and friends. In his eulogy, Pastor Wayne Croft Sr. drew a comparison between the shooter and 2 other infamous cases: George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon Martin, a black teenager, in Florida in 2012, and was acquitted of murder in 2013, and Michael Dunn, who shot and killed Jordan Davis, another black teenager, in Florida in 2012, after a dispute over music. Dunn was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. The pastor expressed the sentiment of the black community, stating that regardless of whether Bianca's murder was a result of road rage or racism, the fact remains that a brilliant young black woman's life was lost. During the trial in September 2018, David Desper was asked to explain his motive for committing the crime. Instead of providing an answer, he requested forgiveness from Bianca's family. For Bianca's parents, the thought of facing their daughter's alleged killer was daunting. To show their support and unity, Rodney had arranged for family members and friends to wear T-shirts with Bianca's face on the front as they gathered at the Chester County Government Services Center. The family of Bianca Roberson wore bracelets with a poignant message: Bianca Roberson, a rose in God's garden. They also held a banner that read, Justice for Bianca Nicole Roberson, a reminder of the tragic event that took her life on June 28, 2017. Rodney, Bianca's father, expressed his uncertainty about how he would react when he saw the man responsible for his daughter's murder. "I don't know what I'll do when I see him," he said. "The man who held the gun that took my daughter's life, he just took her dreams away. He had no right to do that." Michelle, Bianca's mother, struggled to come to terms with the loss of her child. "I want to hold her, comfort her, and bring her back," she said through tears. The prosecutor argued that the traffic conflict occurred because Bianca failed to yield when their lanes merged into one. In response, David Desper rolled down the passenger side window and fired a shot. Realizing the severity of his actions, David Desper fled the scene, leaving his pickup truck with a friend in Pennsylvania, and attempted to escape to Delaware. However, after his sketch and the distinctive features of his pickup truck were publicized in the news, David Desper decided to hire a lawyer and surrender. The police investigated his social media accounts and interviewed his friends but found no evidence to suggest that the crime was motivated by bias. As a result, David Desper was not charged with a hate crime. District Attorney Hogan stated that there was no indication that the crime was racially motivated or a hate crime. However, many people disagreed with this assessment. Before the sentencing, the defense portrayed David Desper as harmless and immature for his age, describing him as a big kid who enjoyed playing with cars in his free time. They argued that David Desper had essentially handed the case to the government by turning himself in. The defense claimed that David Desper was driving home when another car startled him, causing him to fire the gun. They maintained that David Desper was not a menacing individual. Prosecutor Chris Miller countered that a 28-year-old man driving with a loaded firearm is not a big kid. He emphasized that David Desper's actions were those of a responsible adult. Ironically, David Desper's own mother had shared a Facebook post about the police searching for the person who murdered Bianca Roberson, unaware that the suspect was her own son. Wendy Desper expressed her love for Bianca's family and apologized for her son's actions. "I'm so sorry for what my son did," she said, as her son wept. Rodney Robertson struggled to speak through tears as he addressed his daughter's killer. "I have simple questions for the defendant," he said. "Why did you shoot my daughter? Was it because of her youth, her race, her gender, or just because you wanted to go first on the road? Was it simply because you were having a bad day?" Rodney continued, "All my dreams for Bianca were coming true until the day the defendant took her life. Now, all I have left of Bianca are my memories." David Desper pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Judge Anne Marie Wheatcraft became emotional as she announced the sentence, telling Desper, "I don't believe you were afraid, I believe it was anger." County Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft imposed the maximum sentence of 20 to 40 years for that grade of homicide. David Desper attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeal was denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Krista Baker Alexander. Krista Ann Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patty Ann Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers. When Krista was 8 years old, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Krista traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Krista's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Krista adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Cootie Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Cootie was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Cootie had been friends with Krista for many years before he asked her father, Winfred Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Cootie and Krista followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Krista had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Cootie for their wedding day. While Krista helped her parents at church, Cootie was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Krista was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Cootie returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Krista lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Cootie immediately called the police. Krista's body was found near the front door, with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head, with burn marks on her skin, indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Krista's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Krista to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed, the gun cabinet had been forced open, and Krista's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Krista's husband, Cootie Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Cootie reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Kidane Ambulance. He told that he called Krista multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Krista lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Krista was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Krista may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Cootie informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Krista was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Cootie was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Krista's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Krista Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mavis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Krista Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Cootie Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Cootie owned the gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Cootie claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Cootie might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Krista's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Cootie used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Krista. Investigators summoned Cootie to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Cootie explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Cootie's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Cootie revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Cootie, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Krista's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Cootie's account of events. Her father, Winfred Baker, noted that Cootie showed little emotional response to Krista's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Krista's parents also suspected that Cootie was having an affair with a colleague, who had even attended their wedding. Krista had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Cootie was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Cootie and Krista had different visions for their future. However, was this enough motive for Cootie to take Krista's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cootie claimed had bought the gun used to kill Krista. Investigators set out to find Steve, using the description provided by Cootie. Meanwhile, they brought Cootie in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Krista's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cootie's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cootie showed no concern for his pregnant wife Krista's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cootie's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cootie's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cootie then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Krista from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Krista was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Cootie Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on, and then find his wife, Krista, while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Krista was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal and wine, amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts. County and his pregnant wife, Krista, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cootie's initial claim that Krista's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cootie's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Krista's death was not an accident, and Cootie's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Cootie Alexander, Krista's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Krista's father, Winford Baker, remembered her fondly, saying, "She was a sweet and lovely person." Krista had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime. Winford Baker recalled a conversation he had with Cootie shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cootie. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Krista was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord, in heaven, and at peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Cootie's behavior after Krista's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, Cootie faked a robbery and left Krista's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Cootie's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Cootie Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Krista. Cootie had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Cootie suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Krista's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass were colleagues at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Living just 6 miles from the hotel, Alice had joined the team 3 weeks prior and quickly formed friendships with her co-workers, particularly Tibor. Born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, Tibor was a people person who loved music, playing almost every instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He had taught his younger sister, Isabella, to play piano, and they would often perform together for their parents. Tragedy struck in 2007 when Tibor's father passed away, leaving the family struggling to cope. Tibor, then a teenager, took on a more significant role in supporting his mother, Rosalia, and younger sister. At 15, he started working full-time to help alleviate his mother's burden. He later applied to the University of Budapest in 2008, hoping a college degree would lead to a better job and greater financial stability for his family. Despite his exceptional talent, Tibor was unfortunately denied admission to the university. Tibor discussed his plans to move to Great Britain with his mother, who seemed to support the idea. In July 2010, at the age of 19, Tibor relocated to the United Kingdom and settled in London. He began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel, where he enjoyed his job, responsibilities, and interactions with colleagues and new clients. Tibor quickly formed a bond with Alice, a talented musician, as they often found common topics to discuss. Both Tibor and Alice worked as receptionists at the hotel, along with Attila Ban, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest. Attila was recognized as the hotel's best employee in 2010. As Tibor and Attila were both from Hungary, they developed a close relationship. The hotel provided accommodation for its new employees, and Attila and Tibor lived in a company apartment behind the hotel. This arrangement was convenient, as it saved them money and reduced their commute time. Tibor was thrilled to be in England, but he didn't abandon his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was accepted this time around. Overjoyed, he had to return to Hungary in August 2011. To bid him farewell, a small party was organized on August 9, 2011, attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel employees. The next day, the trio was scheduled to work, but none of them showed up. Their colleagues raised the alarm when they failed to report for work at 7 a.m., and the police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the door unlocked and the interior quiet. When an officer opened the door, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face covered by a pillow, with 22 stab wounds on her body, as later confirmed by the medical examiners. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body was found on the bed, having died from 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police surrounded the house to secure the area, and investigators and forensic experts started their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they discovered that the bed where Tibor's body was found was not where he was actually killed. The bed was too tidy, indicating that Tibor had met his fate elsewhere. It appeared that the perpetrator had initially wounded him, removed his clothes, cleaned his body, and then placed him on the bed. Upon further inspection, the apartment was found to contain empty alcohol bottles and illicit substances, suggesting that they had been used during a party. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, the surrounding area, and the attic for Attila Ban, but he was nowhere to be found. His personal belongings, including his papers, were still in the apartment. As a result, Attila became the prime suspect in the investigation. While forensic experts continued to analyze the crime scene, investigators began questioning Attila's co-workers at the hotel. The staff reported that Attila had taken a particular interest in Tibor, a new employee from the same country, immediately showing him around and helping him settle in. Attila even went so far as to adjust his work schedule to match Tibor's. Tibor was a young and attractive man who attracted a lot of female attention. However, investigators discovered that Attila had romantic feelings for Tibor, which he openly expressed. According to the hotel staff, Tibor had rejected Attila's advances, making Attila unhappy. Things took a turn for the worse when Alice joined the hotel staff 3 weeks before her death, and Tibor started paying attention to her. Attila became jealous, despite knowing that Tibor was only interested in women. The investigation raised an important question: Could Attila have committed the murder out of jealousy and unrequited love? A disturbing Facebook post from Attila, made before the police discovered the bodies, suggested that he was indeed involved. At 6:23 a.m., Attila had posted, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare." Friends commented on the post, expressing their concern, but Attila never responded. This message further solidified the investigators' suspicions that Attila Ban was responsible for the deaths of his colleagues. The number of stab wounds provided a clear indication of what had transpired. Alice sustained 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed only twice. Furthermore, the positioning of the victims was telling. Alice was found on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor was discovered on the bed. When investigators spoke with the other people who had been at the apartment earlier that night, they learned that Attila, Tibor, and Alice had been the only ones left behind. This suggested that the tragic events had unfolded after the others had left, in the hours leading up to dawn. The news of Alice's death sent shockwaves through the families of both the victim and the perpetrator. The Adams family, Alice's family, released a statement in which her mother, Sarah, paid a heartfelt tribute to her daughter. She expressed her overwhelming grief, saying, "My heart is shattered into a million pieces. I will carry this sadness with me for the rest of my life. I deeply miss my beloved Alice and would do anything to have one more chance to hug her tightly and see her bright smile. The loss of my child has awakened intense emotions within our family, sorrow, anger, and a sense of devastation that we can hardly bear. As a mother, I feel that I failed to protect my child, and that realization is something I must confront every day. Not knowing exactly what happened to Alice on the night of her murder is a constant torment. I would rather face the harsh truth than be left to imagine the sequence of events that led to her death. Alice was an extraordinary and unique individual who brought so much love, joy, passion, and kindness into the lives of everyone she touched. Her loss is a tragedy that cannot be put into words." Meanwhile, police were searching for Attila Ban, but he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. When they attempted to track his phone, they found that it was transmitting signals from the same area as the hotel, which was unusual. It was later revealed that Attila was actually much closer than anyone had suspected. After spending 2 days examining the crime scene, the investigative team left the house, only to have the forensic team return later to conduct additional tests. Upon re-entering the house, they found that the door they had left unlocked was now locked from the inside. Inside the room, they discovered Attila Ban lying on the bed, intoxicated and wounded after attempting to harm himself with scissors and a knife. The investigators questioned Attila, but he responded bizarrely, using gestures to convey his thoughts. He was then taken to the hospital for medical attention. Unbeknownst to the investigators, Attila had created a hiding space within the sofa bed where Tibor Vasa's body was found. To create this makeshift hiding spot, he had made a slit in the bed's base, grabbed a phone, several bottles of water, and climbed inside. Throughout the investigation, Attila had been secretly watching and listening to the police through the holes he had made. Attila Ban was arrested at the hospital as the main suspect in the crime. His trial began on July 9, 2012, and during the proceedings, details of the heinous crime were revealed. The party had escalated out of control after Tibor, Alice, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. Prosecutors confirmed that there was a consensual physical encounter between the three, with DNA evidence found on Miss Adams' body. The evening took a devastating turn. Attila claimed to have no memory of the events that followed, only recalling waking up the next morning to find Alice and Tibor lifeless. Overcome with guilt and remorse, he considered taking his own life but was too afraid to do so alone. The court learned that Attila had been consumed by jealousy towards Tibor, particularly after a team-building event where he had thrown a tantrum because Tibor was in a photograph and he was not. The situation worsened when Attila discovered that Tibor had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and would be leaving the UK soon. The final trigger was likely witnessing Tibor and Alice kissing, which sent Attila into a fit of rage, ultimately leading him to take the lives of his two friends. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in court that Attila Ban was discovered naked on a single bed, with injuries to his wrists, forearm, and neck. It was later found that he had been hiding in the base of a double bed. Remarkably, he had managed to conceal himself and remain undetected throughout the entire investigation, including the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene examiner's investigation. When questioned about the oversight, Detective Inspector John Finch defended the police, stating that it would be impractical and potentially damaging to lift up every bed in search of people. He explained that this could result in the loss of crucial forensic evidence and was not a standard procedure in such cases. Rosalia, the mother of Tibor Vass, paid a heartfelt tribute to her son, remembering him as a friendly, outgoing, and talented young man. She recalled his childhood interests in music, arts, and sports, as well as his passion for photography, which led him to invest in a professional camera with his first paycheck. According to Rosalia, Tibor had many friends in both Hungary and the UK who appreciated his kind and supportive nature. She said that, on August 11th, I received devastating news. My 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice, had been murdered. The killer was a shocking revelation, Tibor's own friend, who I had trusted to look out for my son. This friend had personally promised to keep Tibor safe, which made the news even more difficult to accept. Days before the murder, I had taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a mature and intelligent friend in London. Now, I was consumed by grief and struggled to comprehend the tragedy. The subsequent police investigation and trial only added to my suffering, forcing me to relive the horrors of that fateful night. The pain and loss my family experiences will stay with us for the rest of our lives. The perpetrator, Attila Ban, pleaded guilty but claimed he couldn't recall the details of the crime. On July 18, 2012, the jury delivered a guilty verdict after just 5 hours of deliberation. A month later, on August 17, Attila Ban was sentenced to 2 life terms. He will have to serve 26 years before being eligible for parole.